Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Anett. I work at Ethereum Magicians as well as Hyperlane. And today we are going to talk about Ethereum governance and how decisions are made on Ethereum and like how people can get involved with the Ethereum governance and how decision making on protocol layer are influencing users and applications. So first off, let's start with introducing our panelists. So feel free to Pooja start and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Pooja Ranjan. I'm the herder-in-chief at Ethereum Cat Herders. Yeah, nice to be here to talk about Ethereum governance and what Ethereum Cat Herders does for Ethereum protocol.
Hey, I'm Matt. I go by lightclient on the internet. I work on the Go Ethereum team at the Ethereum Foundation, doing core development. I'm also an EIP editor, so I spend a lot of time reviewing different standards for the Ethereum protocol.
My name is Danno Ferrin. I wear two hats. One of them is I'm a maintainer for Hyperledger Besu. I'm also a principal software engineer at Swirlds Labs, where we also run an EVM-compatible chain. And the way we do that is we run Besu's EVM. And that's basically all I work on between those two worlds.
Very cool. OK, first question. Can we start with Pooja? So can you just give us an overview of the Ethereum governance, like how it works and like how?
Thank you. I think that is one of the most interesting questions when it comes to decentralized Ethereum governance. So governance, in my mind, is a process that is designed to help in making decision. When it comes to Ethereum, it is a combination of technical specs, technical rules, and community-driven decision-making process. People can better understand it with the components. Those are involved in Ethereum governance. It starts with EIP, which is called Ethereum Improvement Proposal. So if anyone wants to suggest any change to Ethereum protocol, the proposal has to be documented. So it starts right there. And when a proposal is documented, it needs to be discussed. The discussion earlier used to happen at multiple different places, like having at issue, maybe at Reddit, Twitter thread. But recently we have tried to make it sure that every discussion gets centralized to Fellowship of Ethereum Magician. We did this because we wanted for people to know where they can go and share their thoughts. Let them know that whether we like this proposal or we don't like it, what is the plus and minus point they see. If there is any app that is breaking because this proposal is being accepted or considered for future upgrades. So that's another important thing. And because it is for protocol, so obviously it is being discussed by the client development team. So Ethereum currently has two different set of client developers here, execution client and consensus client. So we do have a meeting every Thursday at 1400 UTC. 1 week is for ACDE, All Core Dev Execution, and the other week is for ACDC, All Core Dev Consensus. So these are the three main components. However, just to help out with the network upgrade process, there are two more components added recently. One is called tag, which is when a proposal is proposed, the tag is added at Fellowship of Ethereum Magician called candidate, network candidate tag. So if you are proposing it for, say, for example, Cancun, then you will add it for Cancun upgrade. And when you are proposing it for the further upgrade, then you can name it accordingly. And there is another important thing that has been added recently is called meta thread for any upgrade. Other than discussing at individual Fellowship of Ethereum Magician link, people can now come and share their thoughts. So all in all, we can say that Ethereum governance is a collective decision-making process considering specs and community's thought process in mind.
That was a great introduction. Yeah, Ethereum is very complex and the governance is very decentralized. I'm pretty sure that Matt can tell us more how, like, from you as core contributor to the Ethereum core protocol, how the Ethereum decision making is affecting users.
I mean, this is a good question. There's certain proposals that affect users a lot, and then there's other proposals that users don't ever really end up seeing, or they don't really have the context. So I think something like EIP 1559, this is something that affected all users substantially. Now, the way that you interact with your wallet has totally changed. Then you have these other EIPs, something that maybe changes the cost of some opcode. This is something that users don't see at all. And so it really depends on like where in the stack are we changing things. And I think that's where we have the community dialogue. We have much more dialogue about these changes that are more about like the philosophy about Ethereum. You know, should we be burning ETH whenever we have transactions? What should the issuance of Ethereum be? These are types of things we have a lot of community interaction. There's a lot of discourse across many different groups of people, and there's a lot less discourse about the really like technical aspects of how should this opcode interact with this opcode and these types of things, because it's not something that's very visible, even to developers most of the time. As long as it's hidden behind how Solidity abstracts that opcode, it's something that they just don't ever interact with.
Right. Danno, I'm curious, like, what's your perspective on this topic, like Ethereum governance from like client teams, like what it's like to.
So I'd say that the governance has grown a lot in the past 5 or so years that I've been involved in Ethereum. Back when I started, it was a much smaller EIPs. They just barely crossed 1,000, and we're crossing into 2,000. Now we're up to 5,000. And the scope of what was involved in Ethereum was much, much smaller. So it's much more reasonable to expect a core developer to know the ins and outs of a simple token standard like ERC20 with complexities of, well, it's the most complex thing is probably the allowance approval process. There's not too much complexity in that. You update fields, and those were really critical to make sure that we supported that in the core EVM, which was is just abstraction on top of it, and it helped guide our testing in the way that we used it. But over the years, more and more complex features have grown into the EVM, along with more and more complex features into the development client. I mean, in the past few years, we've had the growth of DeFi, which does some amazing things on the EVM that really, as an EVM person implementing the EVM, I don't have that much exposure to, because whether or not flash loans work or not really just depends on whether or not the opcodes operate as they're specified. And similarly, there's some things going on in the way that, outside of 1559, there have been smaller changes inside the client that have like no exposure to the users that have been specified and cleared up inside of ACD. For example, we introduced a fork ID, which is a networking thing. So when you have two clients getting on there saying, hey, I think you're Ethereum, no, actually I'm Ethereum Classic, they can get information on there much, much sooner than trying to trade blocks and finding out that they disagree on a different block later on. And those are the sort of communication things that somebody developing a flash loan client, the only thing they care about is, am I talking on the correct network? They don't need to figure out the details of how it works. So my experience with it has been that it's been growing, and it's starting to segment appropriately into more focused areas. ACD has recently split into ACDE and ACDC, which are two fairly divergent issues going on with what's going on there. And I think another thing that we're seeing happening with the EIPs and the ERCs is there's been some movement to try and separate these two specs. If we need a flash loan standard, we need a place to standardize that and talk about it, but does it necessarily have to go through the same sort of editors that are going to try and figure out how we're going to set up the KZG ceremony for sharing the blocks in proto-dink sharding? Those are some fairly divergent and with very little overlap of skill sets on a lot of those things. And that's just a good sign of the natural growth of Ethereum that's growing into all these unique areas that specialization is actually valuable in this regard.
Okay. Matt, I'm wondering what's your experience on like Ethereum governance from like the Geth team perspective? Like.
Yeah, so I don't know if you've seen these Twitch streams of people who will put like Pokemon on the Twitch stream, and in the chat you type like the direction you want the character to go. That's kind of how I feel all of the core devs like trying to send their direction that they want the Ethereum protocol to go. And eventually we end up with something that is like what we have today for Ethereum, but it's a lot of like tugging in different directions. People have different ideas of what the protocol is and what the protocol should be. And so like my experience on the Geth team has just been, trying to, share the values that I think like the Geth team has. The Geth team is, most of the core devs generally are very afraid to do much to the protocol. Every time we introduce a change to the protocol, this is introducing risk. And so we need to introduce features and changes to the protocol with a lot of thought and care, and the Geth team is probably like on the other, the most extreme end of being afraid of these things. So that's kind of like my experience of the protocol. Generally, no is the most common word said on these types of calls. No, this is a bad idea. No, we don't have enough developer time. No, we don't have enough testing. This is like the most common way. And then occasionally, every once in a while, we find a feature that really aligns with the philosophy of Ethereum, and it's something that we end up like really pushing through. I think that Tim Bako has a really good analogy for how upgrades in Ethereum kind of work today. And the analogy is that you sort of have like one EIP that's sort of the like headliner band of an upgrade, and everything sort of like fills in. You find some like auxiliary bands, some auxiliary EIPs to sort of come in and play the initial parts. But it's really about that big one change in an upgrade.
So do you think that there is like a coordination issue in like core protocol?
I mean, we were talking about this a few minutes ago, and I think it's funny. It's a lot quieter now about people saying Ethereum governance doesn't work. Ethereum moves too slowly. I think before the merge, there was a lot of frustration. And then, in this like pre-merge era, there was a time, maybe like 2017 to 2020, where very little was happening at the core protocol, and there's a lot of frustration. But I think now that we've done proof of stake, we have merged these two things together. A lot of people are like, okay, these are really difficult systems. I think, at the end of the bridge panel, they said this is like writing airplane code. If there's a problem in the protocol falls out of the air and crashes into the ground. And I think people are just starting to realize that it's not something, you can't treat this like a startup project. You can't turn your ship around in a couple weeks. It's something that just takes, oftentimes years. And so we're sort of, getting better at governance, but also understanding more like what is governance? How do you govern a project that's worth multiple hundreds of billions of dollars, where you have like disparate groups trying to, create the protocol?
Yeah. I'm curious, Pooja, to hear your ideas. Like you're like one of the core coordinators of the Ethereum governance. Like, what do you think about like how it's like to be from your perspective to like trying to coordinate core devs and trying to like herd those cats, as we refer usually to core devs as like cats?
Do we herd easily?
It's not that easy. You guys are not that easy, but not like very difficult as well. I think it comes naturally when any proposal is under discussion on any core dev call. People try to share their honest opinion over there, like, okay, we want to have this in for these reasons, and if there are some downside of that, then we start discussing about the trade-offs that we are going to make, whether to get this in or not. So it's eventually like a decision that is not completely based on technical trade-offs, or either on the social trade-offs that we are going to make there. But we try to keep a good mix and balance of what we want to add at which point of time. Say, for example, a proposal is good, but may not be good at this point to be considered for an upgrade, because of many other reasons. There could be so many other proposals, big proposal and then upgrade, and we cannot have that small proposal in. Then we push that for the future upgrade. It's not that we just say, no, you do not have a room here. We do have a room. Maybe we can try it in the next upgrade. So I would say that it's not very difficult. It's a community-driven process, and governance is generally difficult but good when it comes to Ethereum, because everyone is doing their best here.
Well, everybody's trying to like do their best. Anyway, Danno, so what was your experience to like attend the all core devs calls and like trying to like, when you guys try to like improve something on Ethereum core governance, like do you think that there is a place for teams or like for clients or protocols to like get involved in the core governance, or is it just like impossible?
So I think it's critical for them to be involved in the core governance. Sometimes, waiting until the all core devs call to raise an issue might be a little late, because I think that's one of the core issues we're starting to experience in some of the coordinations of these multiple layers. For example, I've been working on the EVM object format with the Epsilon team from the Ethereum Foundation, And some of the things that we're changing, people like implementing Solidity are like all for. It's like, yeah, let's get rid of jump desks. That'll save us 20% of our code. And then we spring on them another thing is just like, oh yeah, by the way, your data size and your contract can't change. And they're like, well, wait a minute. We have constructors that use arrays with variable lengths, and we need to be able to, when we deploy our contracts, have multiple links on it to save it. And it's these sort of things that when you're deep in the code, you don't always realize how other people are using it. So my experience with all core devs is that's usually the time where we learn about these interactions between the different layers, and where we learn about how moving the cheese is going to ruin someone's day, or how it's going to be the best thing in the world for them if we move that cheese. And so if there's one thing I would improve about this experience as I've been in there, is if we can figure out new ways to get people to pay attention to these earlier than the moment before they show up on an ACD agenda. If we could get people joining into the various boards in the Ethereum Magicians board and read up on the data, if we could figure out who the people in these various groups are that we could outreach to. So like when we're changing a feature in a way a transaction is built, if we had a list of wallet people, we could go and say, we're going to be changing everything in the wallet to SSV. How much is this going to make it difficult for you, and how long do you need to do it? If we can get those coordination things solved before we get it on a call, I think that would make things move a lot quicker. But if they wait until the call, as long as they come on the call and get the issues, it's better than nothing. So what we got working now is working, but it can be improved like anything.
Do you have an idea how this can be improved?
We could.
Any panelists can jump on to this question if you.
So I think we are already trying to help out with the process in terms of like what Danno is referring here is like kind of doing some of the things in the background before it is brought to the core dev discussion. We did some kind of something similar when it was for 1559. 1559 was something like, kind of a split opinion there. Miners were against it, devs were in for there. So we try to bring all of these people, all these invested parties on a close call and discuss things together. So that is one thing that could be done in advance. And I think Tim has recently started this very interesting thing to have this discussion on Discord channel beforehand. So if we have this discussion in the Discord channel, we know who is thinking what, and everybody gets enough time to come up with like a concrete support for whatever they are going to say in there. So, yep.
Go ahead.
So one thing I did think of on my brain freeze, if we had a list of like wallet developers, people building compilers, people, we know who all the client developers are. But if we had a similar list and we have these issues, we could proactively reach out to them a little easier.
Okay. So it was like similar issue as when the EIPs started becoming like split into like EIPs and ERCs, and then there was like another group that became like a EIP IP working group, which actually Hudson started, who was on board on Ethereum catalysts, and actually Lane is in here with us as well, who was one of the core members or like one of the people that started Ethereum catalysts as well. So this has started like this whole new movement of like how Ethereum, like how standards can be improved, and like how pretty much like the standardization of smart contracts can get like sort of new life, or like how we can improve the standardization itself, and how more projects can get involved, which is great way how.
Right. I mean, I would say that this EIP-IP meeting that we organize with the help of EIP editors like here Matt and many others, that has helped us a lot in improving the process. So earlier there were a lot of confusion around like where to go, what to do when it comes to different types and categories of EIPs. So we tried to come up with a standard process for every EIP. However, core EIPs may have a little bit different things than the ERC category proposals, but we are trying to help out everyone who is interested in making contribution by suggesting a proposal to Ethereum repository. And this EIP-IP meeting is especially about defining the process of a standardization, what all stages a proposal has to go, what would be reviewed, and how it can be finalized there. So yeah, that's been so helpful.
So it's all about like mainly people, like from the Ethereum governance perspective, it's like a little bit different, but from the practical perspective, like, do you guys think that there is still a place for people to bring up new standards and new IPs, or it has to be like literally like a movement of like, you know, as we had ProcPow like a couple of years ago or months or whatever, when people started like literally like, hey, here's a ProcPow, let's talk about it, and like start bringing up memes. And all kind of like, it was mainly around DEF CON in Osaka, when the ProcPow become pretty much like the whole topic of the DEF CON itself. So do you guys think that there is like still a place for people to bring up like better standards, or they should like, or the community itself have to like form like new group and like make memes themselves in order to like sort of like pioneer the standards? Anybody can join.
So I think that's kind of an example of how the nature of Ethereum governance works, is it worked in that ProcPow situation. There was no token voting, there was no voting by clients, there was no interest, no community board, no board meeting where we had a vote. The community, when they saw a problem, they rose up and they discussed it, and it was ugly, to be honest, at times. But they came to a conclusion. You know, the issues wasn't just for ProcPow, it was to an extent, the viability of the merge coming up and making sure that we could still do the merge. And what came out from that was the firm commitment to do the merge and to do what is necessary to happen. And, you know, there was memes that came to try and stop ProcPow, and they were ultimately successful. But that's just the example that Ethereum governance is ultimately about the people and the users. You know, it's the software developers write the software, and the people running the network decide which network they're going to run. And that is the two core pillars of Ethereum governance.
Matt, do you think that the bridges can have like its own like IP?
The bridges.
Yeah.
I mean,
Really?
to be honest, I was listening to this bridge panel, and I was like, this is so incredible. I barely have any idea what's happening on this bridge panel, and I'm working on, you know, on the core protocol. Like, there's so much being built on top of all of these things that I'm like kind of lost in all this application world. I think, you know, in general, things are good to standardize where it makes sense, but I don't even know if I have enough context on all the different nuances between the bridges to know, like, does it make sense for there to be an EIP for bridges? I think these things like IBC are the sort of a standard for how to bridge across different protocols, and should there be an IBC EIP, I think that would, you know, might make some people unhappy.
Does Cordevs talk to like other blockchains, or like, are you guys like on the like Ethereum focused, or like are you guys like looking, like I'm wondering from like the Ethereum governance perspective, like are you guys looking into like governance, like how other L1s or even L2s are being governed, and like are you guys like talking to these people, or like it's specifically just, oh, like I'm Ethereum and like we're just doing like Ethereum governance ourselves and we don't care about others, or like it's more of like, oh, actually Ethereum Foundation is talking to like, let's say, other L1s or L2s?
I don't know. I feel like maybe not as much about, I don't think we look to as many different protocols in terms of governance, because I think, I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I think Ethereum is like one of the most decentralized governance protocols, whereas like many other protocols, there's like still pretty central core of people who are proposing changes and making it happen, and that's just because they're earlier on their arc of like building a decentralized platform. So I don't think we look as much about, you know, how is X chain doing governance, but we absolutely are looking to see how other chains are scaling themselves, or, you know, what types of features they're adding, how people are using those chains. That's absolutely something that like core developers are looking at. I know for the Go Ethereum team, we often get people who have either forked our client for their chain, or they're adding new features for a product, and they try to, you know, propose these things like, hey, I found a way to make the Geth database a lot faster, and those are things that we review, and if they make sense, then we try and like use those ideas or like work with that person. But at the end of the day, like I think a lot of chains are really just focused on building momentum and building market share, and there's you know, a lot of like bless you. There's a lot of rebranding of ideas, you know, so it's hard to know, like, is this a true innovation, or is this something that's already been discussed and discarded, or something that's been discussed and something that we're trying to do in the future?
So from your perspective, you don't think so that other like protocols or other L1s and L2s care about the governance, but more of like the liquidity of the protocols itself?
I mean, I don't know enough about how a lot of these chains do governance. Like, I'm not sure how Celestia or Solana does governance. I mean, my guess is that just there's just such a small group of people still involved with those chains. I don't know, Pooja, do you follow their governance?
If I may
protocols?
add, like I agree with Matt here. Like Ethereum in itself is a very good example of decentralized governance. I think it's kind of role model, but it's not that we are not interacting with any other chain. Like many other chains are dependent on the EVM that is basically a core component provided by the Ethereum chain. So teams are trying to approach. In fact, today itself, someone from Polygon approached us. They have some suggestion in mind. They want to propose a proposal for future upgrade. So they wanted to know what is our process, how they can propose their proposal. So if EVM is improved, it's not for Ethereum, it's for many other people who are trying to like get influenced and follow it in their particular blockchain. So we are trying to interact. So as far as governance is concerned, I think we are kind of role model because we are one of the biggest chain and we are trying to make it as decentralized as possible. But at the same time, we are also considering other chains, L2 chains, to be a part of it.
Is there any particular chain that you guys would love to collaborate with or partner with?
I think we are open to everyone, whoever, like not only chain, any project, decentralized project, if there is any improvement feature which can help these projects. It's not about helping one project, it's about helping million users of those projects. So we are open to it. We just have a set of process in place. We will try to, like as a cat herder, we try to explain the process, what it is, and if it fits, like if it checks every boxes, so that can eventually become a part of Ethereum protocol.
So what you guys do to help?
So for helping out, again, I would say that EIP IP meeting is one of the things. Then we are trying to have EIP editing office hour where we provide information about how to document the proposal. Then we try to talk to people time to time, explaining the process if someone is not directly from the Ethereum ecosystem. And we, as a cat herder, try to have our representative opens everywhere. Like we try to interact with every project. Not every, I mean like whoever wants to talk to us, they can obviously come and join us and share their thoughts. So that's the idea of like, we don't want Ethereum to be centralized for Ethereum people only. It's kind of something that can be given to every other blockchain which is existing here.
Where people can find more information how Ethereum governance works, or like how people can get involved?
So how people can get involved, I think the best starting point would be EIP1. You start documenting your proposal. When a proposal is documented, I think EIP1 provides you quite a few references how to move forward. And after that, again, Ethereum cat herders are there. So at Eat Cat Herders Discord, we are trying to help out with any specific question or query that comes around.
Perfect. Anything else you guys would like to add to it?
I would like to give a hand to Elaine, who is one of the founders of Ethereum cat herders here. Thank you for joining us today.
Okay.
Where does the name come from?
Okay, yeah, that is very interesting story. I think it's a kind of like a Super Bowl ad that was very popular at the time. It was like a group of cowboys herding a lot of cat around. So people thought that Ethereum is like that. It would be like kind of herding a lot of cats, putting them together for decision making on at the time of upgrade. Sometimes it is very important to have coordination, perfect coordination. So to coordinate all these things, people thought that having a group of Ethereum cat herders might be helpful.
That's a great way how to end this panel. I'm wondering, does anybody have a question for panelists? Yeah, go ahead.
So using something like using the asset to vote on decisions, I view as a huge centralization risk. And the reason it's a centralization risk is because there is one place where you can go to gather your tokens to influence the vote. And it's obvious, and the rewards are obvious there. Using the social consensus, really the only way to game the system is to convince everyone that you have the right idea, which I think is the correct way to go about getting changes in the system, is to get everyone on board with you. And that's not centralization if it's coming from one person, if everyone agrees that it's the right idea. But when you buy a token and you say, well, we own 66% of the token, so this passes, that's centralization, and the remaining 33% are going to move and go elsewhere. So I think not having a centralized mechanism is an essential value of the Ethereum governance process.
Cool. Thank you. Oh, okay, Lane, go ahead.
I want to ask about the cadence of network upgrades, right? So historically, there were like major upgrades every kind of 12 to 18 months, and a lot of that was dictated by the Ice Age, the difficulty bomb. But back to your point, there's a new model now where you have like a single key EIP and then like a supporting cast around it. Especially so in light of that and in light of the merge, like do you foresee it still being a similar cadence going forward, or more often with like more frequent, smaller upgrades?
Yeah, I mean, I'm extremely curious to see how it goes without having an Ice Age. I think like the Ice Age was an incredible invention, even though it created a lot of pain at certain times. But right now there's so many things that are on the roadmap, and there's so much pressure to ship a lot of this stuff. I think withdrawals, this Shanghai upgrade, this is like kind of a gimme for the core developers, because it was, obviously this is the next thing we have to do, and we have to do it as fast as we can. The next thing that we do, hopefully it's 4844. That's something, again, that the community is like begging for more scalability. And so it's like we have to ship this as fast as we can. It just feels like there's like at least another 3 or 4 things that are extremely in demand, and we have to ship them as soon as we can. And so it's most likely that those will still follow that 12 to 18 month range. I think, we've looked at how fast is it possible to do an upgrade, and between Berlin and London, that might be the fastest upgrade we'll ever see. I think it was 4.5 months or so. I don't know if we'll ever do another upgrade in less than 6 months, especially given that we want to do 4844, vertical trees, a lot of other stuff like that.
Excluding Ice Age bumps.
Excluding Ice Age bumps, yeah.
We got to wrap. Okay, thank you so much to panelists for great discussion, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it as well. The time is over, so we have to run, but feel free to catch us later after a panel for any additional questions. Thank you. So,